So I have a little bit of a guessing game for you.
Oh, let's play.
I'll tell you how much plastic waste Americans generated last year.
Oh, no.
All right. And then you're going to guess what percentage of that was recycled.
Oh, no. Okay.
So Americans generated 51 million tons of plastic waste last year. What percentage of that do you think was recycled?
I'm going to say 3.
It was better than that. 5%.
Oh, wow. Okay, I almost said 5. Wow, I was going to say 5. I'm like, that seems like too whole of a number.
5%.
5.
So for those of you playing at home, apparently this is from a Greenpeace report that just came out this week, Monday. Apparently that's down from our high of 10% in 2014.
Ooh, 10 whole
Yeah.
percent. That's okay. They're putting the rest of the plastic inside of our bodies and stuff now.
That's the thing, man. Even in recycling and stuff, that stuff generates microplastics that people are breathing in. It's an incredibly toxic environment to do that in. So recycling itself, plus when they recycle it, it turns out that's not ever going to be food grade recycling, recycled plastic, which is, one of the very important usages for it. So it's rough.
Oh, good. Isn't it shitty that the way we're becoming cyborgs is with microplastics and heavy metals in our body?
Yeah, no, just lovely. Apparently, also, 40% of Americans just straight up don't have good access to recycling facilities, at all. And then those of us that do are excessively throwing in recycling that can't be recycled. So, you know how it has a little recycle symbol with the number?
Yeah, yeah.
The vast majority of those, really the only ones that can recycle, are 1 and 2.
Okay.
The next one drops to 50% of recycling collection facilities nationwide can do some of the number 5s.
Great.
And that's it. The other ones are just yeah, we put the recycling logo on there, but nobody can recycle them. So
why do it?
Mysterious. To feel good, to check the box of corporate responsibility.
Oh, you're right. If you live, our parents live outside of the city limit and they don't get a recycling bin, it becomes your personal responsibility to go take your recycling. So if you live in a more rural area, that sucks.
Yeah. Just not an option. So there you go. Plastics. Oh. Everyone's favorite.
Good. Delicious. Sprinkle me some plastics on my food, please. Crunch for that crunch.
All right. What are we actually here to do today?
We are here, against all odds, to try to assuage some of the fears of the public with a listener Q&A. We can't tackle the existential threat of climate change and, impending doom and all that, but we can answer your questions.
Yeah, that's what we're here to do. The comfort of your soul is on you.
Good luck. I recommend Halloween candy.
Yes, that works wonders.
We're giving out king-size bars this year. Redistribution, man.
My goodness.
That's my mutual aid, is making all the parents in the neighborhood hate me.
Yeah, talk about praxis.
Take the candy. And I'll just write on all of them communism's good.
Just wrap a little red band on it with a little hammer and sickle.
Yeah. That'd be hilarious.
They're just the communists give us gray candy.
I think it's cool to be a gay communist. Okay, first up, we have a question from Adrian. I hope I'm saying his name right. There were some accents on there in the Twitter DM, so forgive me if I am not.
All right, so Adrian said, "Hey, this is very random, but I listened to your podcast on the struggle in Ireland overall. I was generally impressed by the knowledge of the historical context of the struggle, but I have a few issues I wanted to straighten out. It was said that Sinn Féin became a neoliberal party and that Irish unity drifted from people's aspirations. Both are untrue. Sinn Féin's objectives have remained the same, and the ultimate objective being a 32-county socialist republic. Sinn Féin in the last 6 county elections got its largest vote it has ever seen. This can be seen as a mandate for the reunification of the country, and it's about us now pushing for a referendum on that which is enshrined in the Good Friday Agreement. We hope to see that referendum within the next decade. It was said Irish republicanism was at a weak point. Again, this is completely the opposite. It's at its strongest ever, with Sinn Féin being the largest party north and south. Our support is strong in working class communities because we have been rooted in those communities, fighting for public services, fighting for community projects, and fighting for workers' rights. Our victory in 2020 was a result of the crisis in housing, healthcare, and declining living standards. While we won that vote on policies such as better public services and public housing, we also support the development of an economy that has worker cooperatives and community-owned industries at a grassroots level. Most of the older generation of the party are ex-combatants who fought in the liberation struggle, where many obviously lived through those days. They still play a massive role in the party. It's clear they still see the party in revolutionary terms and as a vehicle for independence and social liberation of the Irish people. Also, internationally, we have links with Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua, Palestine, the Basque Country, and other revolutionary struggles and governments.
I mean, those are like all my best friends in terms of governments.
That's a cool list. Yeah, I wanted to read that into the record basically because, like, I very much appreciate the correction. Like, we've talked about it before. I like being corrected. So thank you, Adrian. I went back to listen to our, section on there or whatever, how we were characterizing, and the source material that I was kind of working with. So I was kind of shooting from the hip a little bit with the characterization of Sinn Féin as neoliberal. The one account I was going off of there was one of Rev Left Radio's episodes on the IRA. He had a Marxist organizer on the show named David Swanson, he was interviewing about this, and he kind of said, yeah, Sinn Féin, shadow his former self, neoliberal, all this. And so that's kind of what I was running with. This correction made me kind of look back into it some more. I think that the thrust of that was more about like the EU and sort of supporting that project and trade relations and things like that. And saying like, oh, that was
that specific issue.
Right.
Maybe.
Like that was kind of neoliberal of them to do that. But my research recently, looking into it based on Adrian's correction here, I mean, I think I agree with this correction that, for one, Sinn Féin does still support reunification. Like they have it in their platform, they have it on their website, they talk about it. They didn't, so some sources have said that they didn't emphasize it in the most recent election, but it's still there, it's still a part.
Yeah, that's huge. And
polling on this question does look increasingly good over the years. It's not majorities, but it's still like kind of close. Like if you look at the graph of it, it's like kind of converging. And that's in Northern Ireland. In Ireland proper, the Republic of Ireland, they're like, yes, look.
Yes, we would like that.
And then for the other part about socialism versus being neoliberal, it doesn't look like they're running around, they don't have like big, posters of Marx or
they're not handing out the Halloween candy with red ribbons.
Yeah. But their platform does seem to be far further left than any major party that we have here in the States. So I can't talk too much shit about it. I mean,
yeah, that sounds amazing. All those things that they're trying to do as far as housing and like the deep roots with the working class, like that sounds fantastic. Wish we had that kind of organization here. Yeah,
for real. So just kind of a my bad, I mean, that was playing fast and loose with the neoliberal term.
I think maybe some of what happened there was, such a wide breadth of topics in that episode. And I think our wrap-ups always tend to be like, oh, here's kind of the basic gist of how it is now. So I think we didn't dive deep into that topic. And, it sounds like we needed more sources on that area. I say we, I didn't help at all, so
it's on me, right? This motherfucker over here.
I'm saying. No, that's not what I'm saying. I don't want to take credit for all the hard work you do, is what I'm saying. And yeah, I mean, we're just people and we fuck up sometimes, but we actively welcome this kind of interaction. So go for it, y'all.
Yeah, man, because this makes us smarter. This makes our audience better informed. I mean, it's great all around.
Yeah, win-win.
I hope that Sinn Féin's successful in pushing for this referendum. It does look like there's more popular support. Especially, I mean, right now, the United Kingdom is in shambles.
Yeah, I'd love to leave that place if I had a choice.
Draw it up, like this is maybe a good time to push for this, even more. And the Scots, if y'all want to break free trade, do it,
Yeah, just to everybody, you guys should just leave that shithole.
Strike while the iron is hot, as they say.
Next, we'll talk about one of your favorite question mark subjects. Which is BlackRock and Vanguard.
I'm talking about these all the time. Ask anybody who knows me.
I mean, I have heard you mention them before, and I don't know anything about them, so this is hearkening back to the very premise of the show, which is explain this to me.
Okay.
The origin of this question, though, does come from our friend Dan, always a good source for questions, and he basically asked us, kind of the same thing, have you looked into these guys? They supposedly own almost everything between the two, even Amazon, Tesla, Microsoft, etc. What are these?
I looked into this. These are basically giant investment firms. Their clients. I got the horror movie lightning thunder going on in the background.
As you say, investment firms.
So
the world's most scary profession.
So their clients all invest all kinds of money through them in all sorts of very complicated ways. I mean, you can buy stocks through them. You can do index funds. You can have a fancy guy in a fancy suit come in and give you reports on how smartly and shark and predatory ways that he's investing your money to get maximum returns or whatever. All sorts of shit you can do. I don't know all the details.
It's fucking shell game,
Well, but
I don't know.
It's also regular people. You can have 401ks and
I guess that's
Roth
true. Yeah.
IRAs or whatever, IRAs, all that shit. Regular investment stuff. People have that, or low grade regular people, not regular people really, but through my understanding, Vanguard and BlackRock are the managers and investors of their clients' money. So they have a ton of money coming in, and they are investing it and buying stocks and stuff, but they're on behalf of their clients. So let's say BlackRock goes in, buys a ton of Amazon stock, even if they have more than 50% or whatever. If they end up with these big amounts, it's still not technically them.
It's not I now own it. It's 100 people now own it or whatever.
Yeah, so it's not one guy owning it. It's all these different clients running through these companies that own it. So they do they can do proxy votes for corporate governance bullshit. It's boring. No one cares about that. Does not matter. But they're not they don't have this weird controlling interest. They're not pulling the strings. Oh, we've got to listen to what Vanguard says because it's not, Vanguard isn't really a single entity in that regards. It's just a bunch of people investing, buying the stocks.
Okay. So annoying and shouldn't exist, but maybe not the most evil.
Yeah, it's not as sinister as it looks, basically. It's still capitalism. It still sucks.
Ooh.
It's bad.
Yeah, against it.
It's still, Marx's general formula of capital is MC M prime.
Man Crush Monday Prime?
Yes. So capitalists invest M, which is money, capital, into commodities, C, and then they sell it for M prime, which is more money, more capital.
It's fucking true. I mean, if you just look at the data around even housing, it's way easier for people to buy second and third homes because they already have that starting capital of a first home.
And that's one of the things that people have been complaining about, these investment groups. Apparently BlackRock doesn't directly engage in this, but certain other, big, huge ass investment firms do. They will buy homes on the market in cash above asking price.
Of course.
And then, use that, spin it off in either sell it or spin it off into a rental property management thing. And this just drives up housing costs for everybody because they're competing with a non-financed, like a cash offer above asking price. Like, how are you going to,
There's just
what are
no
you going
way.
to do? But I think the video tried to emphasize too much that these guys are like the end all be all. And it's not these individual corporations that you should be worried about. It's the faceless horde of corporate titans and their small business owning, bootlicking underlings.
It's the system and the people who support it.
Yeah, there you go. That's it. Which, I mean, they all have actual names and addresses. Let's not get it wrong. But
Oh, yeah.
but they that's the main thing, that the system is that M prime is just, and sometimes they can take a shortcut. Capitalists would love to take the shortcut of money to more money.
Oh,
and I
yeah.
mean, that's what we saw with crypto, right? It's like they were just trying to jump over it and not give you a real thing in between, and just magic money.
Do some magic to it, yeah.
And so they'll always try to do that. Speculating, usury, which is what we used to call the like biblical crime of loaning people money and charging interest.
Dude, okay. Do you know about like the history of that, I guess?
What do you mean?
So that fucking lecture series I'm watching, they were talking about usury and how, it's a crime. And so what, the church did was, basically made it so that they changed the laws so that that's like one of the few professions that Jewish people could do. And so all the Jewish people became moneylenders, and like that just like added reasons for people to hate them.
Yeah. And then the kings would periodically be like, oh, I'm too much in debt to the Jewish moneylenders.
I'll just get rid of all the Jewish
I'm
people.
going to incite pogroms against them, kick them out of my country, take all the gold back, and there you go.
Yep. And then they're like, well, I need someone to handle my money. Let me get them back here.
Right.
It's ridiculous.
Yep. That's called the primitive accumulation of capital, folks.
It's bad.
Yep. Capitalism, it's bad.
That should be our new tagline. Okay, next, another sort of correction here from Jared. He says, I found your 2 episodes on food production under capitalism very interesting. However, in the second episode, I found the discussions around organic meat and veganism maybe missed some points. I come from New Zealand, and we have a very destructive grass-fed dairy and beef industry here. And he also sent us an interview from like the national broadcaster in New Zealand, and I gave it a listen. It's really good. We'll go over that in a second. But he continues to say that something that I mentioned about animal meat processing, in the absence of for-profit food corporations, the transparency into what happens to animals inside of slaughterhouses will improve. This made me stop and think a lot, and I think what made me do so was the fact that this argument depends on an assumption of good faith. In many scenarios, it is sensible to assume that the proletariat would act in a more ethical fashion than the bourgeoisie. However, where our food comes from today is a subject that we are so willfully ignorant of as a society that I am skeptical of this position. At best, society will be slow to react and bring change to the way our food is industrialized. Currently, there's too much cognitive dissonance. For that reason, I think that there's value in viewing veganism from a socialist perspective. The exploitation of both animals and land is greatly reduced by the promotion of a vegan diet. As vegan myself, I find the prevalence of meat in the Western diet a glaring example of capitalist decadence. The promotion of a vegan diet for those who already have an abundance of choice is therefore an important part of my socialist worldview. In your episode on combat liberalism, you talked about having a strong ideological front against liberal exceptionalism, and I think our consumer habits are an example of something we perhaps make too many excuses for. Woof, yeah. I'm laughing because it's true. So let's start with the interview. This is with an environmental academic named George Monbiot, and it is really good. Highly recommend a listen. We'll have a link on our Patreon notes, but you can also probably just do a Google and find it. It was from RNZ, which is...
Radio New Zealand?
That sounds good to me.
No, I just made it
I'm
up.
like, wait, I'm pretty sure, yeah.
Complete with bad New Zealander attempt.
Beautiful.
Thanks.
Yeah, it was a super good interview. It's only about like 45 minutes. I think the lady was really funny. She was the interviewer, and she like... is like pretty aggressive in her interviewing style. Like, I don't know if that's just like the norm there, and I'm just so used to softballs in the American press. But she was like, what about this? What about this? And like, I don't know. It was interesting though, because it like spurred good discussion, and I think she was like still respectful. But basically, the large points in there was that like land use is a huge issue in terms of environmentalism. We think, the big problem is cities and there's too many people and like that's the real pollutant, but like only 1% of our land mass is urban and 38% of it is used for farming.
This is worldwide or? This
is worldwide.
Wow, okay.
And most of it though is only in like certain areas of the globe though. It's not like everybody is farming. And 26% total is used for pasture-fed meat, which only provides 1% of our protein. So just like very bad efficiency.
Yeah, that's kind of wild.
Yeah, so it's super bad for basically everything. It's bad for water usage. It's bad for carbon. All that land is taking up from like natural ecosystems. It just causes a lot of waste. And he talks about like some of the common, I guess I would say common ways we try to soothe ourselves with these like silver bullet solutions of like, oh, what if we do bioplastics or biofuels? Or what if the problem is just population? And it's really interesting because he just like tackles myths really well, I think. He's just like, yeah, that's just not true. Like, here's the real problem. Like, he does a great job of like pointing to the actual problem of, it's not population growth. It's not, it's not any of these other single issue things, and gives great examples of like how those get twisted by capitalism. So for example, biofuels, that is often starts with like a lot of positive marketing of, oh, it's just going to be made out of like the waste material we don't use. It's just like, the stems of a plant or, the stuff we normally throw away. We're going to turn into this cool fuel. But as soon as there's a market for it, forget about it. They're going to start planting that crop specifically for that fuel.
Yeah.
He at one point says, like, the biggest determining factor in how much you actually contribute to waste in the environment is how rich you are. Like, that's it. Like, you can, even if you're trying to be an eco-conscious consumer and all that stuff, like, all in all, like, that is the largest determining factor.
The richer you are, the more waste you produce, or the less, or?
The more waste you produce, the more harmful you are to the ecosystem. So, I'm just saying, again, these guys have addresses. Parody. He also talks about some cool, like, potential avenues for solutions. One I really was interested in was something called precision fermentation, which is basically using microorganisms to make a really protein-rich flour that's, like, not dependent on photosynthesis. So, like, totally is outside of that cycle, which I just think is fascinating. But yeah, basically he pushes against the notion, I think the very capitalist notion of dominion over the land, of like, we have to utilize every bit of land for production, and says like, no, we need to return these lands to the wilds. Like, we need that. That's how we live.
Right. We have to be, we're a part of this ecosystem, and like we were saying, and well, what the hell do we call that episode?
Intro to Ecosocialism.
Yeah, our eco-socialism
I write the
episode.
titles, guys. He does not.
That, instead of seeing capital, just sees the natural world as completely renewable and just a gift, just free ingredients, versus, to look at things scientifically, you have to say, well, I'm a part of this metabolic structure that has inflows and outflows, and we can't just bleed it dry. I mean,
yeah.
We can, but we can do that only once.
Then it's done. And we're done. Yeah, I mean, I highly recommend giving it a listen. I might try to see if his book is at my library, because he sounds really cool. I like his approach, and yeah, recommend. As far as kind of the rest of Jared's argument, I do admit that I do tend to think the best of the theoretical proletariat. I have a very Kropotkin type faith in them, I think.
Just turn them loose.
It'll be fine.
We'll figure out the cloaks.
Yeah, just do it.
Figure out the houses.
But I do agree with the overall point of like, yeah, we are super disconnected from our food. Like, I read advice columns, and like in the parenting one, there's always someone being like, when do I have to tell my kid that chicken is also like the same thing as the animal? Like, you have to, have those conversations with people, because the way our meat is produced is so sliced up and packaged. But my theory is that if we are doing things like advocating for even just like something as basic to socialism as like worker rights, that will result in like more humane treatment of animals. Because like we've seen the studies on slaughterhouses, they're horrific. One of the worst places to work.
Yeah.
Just in general.
Those are routinely, awful, high stress.
High stress, high physical risk, all that shit. So even if like that's our base level argument of good faith, like I think we can all agree like that's something we would all fight for in that scenario. Like that would improve it. I do think like consumers would have more power in this scenario too. I also think the circumstances of our revolution would probably reduce our meat intake if it's such an inefficient system. Like we can't fucking afford to do that, probably. Yeah. Unless we are in full on replicator town. So, and I think if I had my druthers, like, yeah, I think we should reduce it. I think it's the responsible thing to do. I think meat should be like an every now and then celebratory thing. I think we do have enough science now to like start exploring these alternate protein sources and these other ways of approaching it. So like, I don't think problem is like we won't be able to survive. I think it's more of like, it is more of a self-discipline problem, I guess. But one that I hope we could like get on the same page. I think my issue is I don't feel comfortable saying like no more meat ever. Maybe I am too soft in that way. But like I think it's okay to say like, hey, a couple times a year you can totally have meat.
That makes sense. I am comfortable with just telling myself that if I need to, then okay. But telling other people is the difference. But I do think that we could help ourselves by making sure that eco-socialism is kind of at the heart of our project, right? This can help address it. Because the main thing, at the end of the day, you do like have to put your faith in people like you're saying, right? And that means you can't really command them, hey, you want to be a good socialist, a good communist, you're going to be vegan, and that's it. Okay, why? Like, and I think the convincing has to come in there and showing them why that's part of, why that will help the overall project. And right now, I don't think it'll help them to make that individual choice aside from their own soul. But in the large scale, I think it will. So we've got to be, among the masses, educating them about the importance of caring for the earth and the role, like this interview points out, of meat consumption, in that process. That's just an awareness campaign, which is extremely ineffectual in capitalist societies.
Absolutely.
Oh, great. I'm aware that, we only recycle 5% of plastics. So what?
Yeah, I'm not going to go figure out how to do it myself.
Right? I'm aware that they're, destroying the Amazon rainforest. Well, okay. What am I going to do with it? Nothing. Because it's the dictatorship of the bourgeoisie. Awareness campaigns, jack shit. But in the revolutionary circumstance, awareness campaigns go from ineffectual to crucial. Because now, who's in the driver's seat?
The people.
It's the people, right? So the people need to be aware. So when we're talking about, you have too much faith in the people, that's part of the project, is making sure that the people are educated, are aware of the consumption of meat and its impact on all this and everything. And yeah, their knee-jerk reaction might be, but this is how we've always done it. I've always had, turkey on Thanksgiving and whatever, or chicken nuggets, I love chicken wings. I'm not going to give that, okay, that's their normal human response. But when they're shown like its impact and everything and what you can do about it, not what you can beg some corporate executive to do about it, that changes things, I think. I think that changes the scene. To me, maybe that's the same thing with consumption choices too, consumer habits and all that, is that right now it's of extremely limited impact.
Yeah, I feel useless against that kind of stuff.
The only positive maybe is like it helps popularize certain ideas for the future, but it's not going to really change things until the masses, actually are in control their own destiny, and then their consumption choices, that steers society at that point. But right now we're just like, it's kind of a project of weighing your sins. you know?
Yes, it all comes down to personal choice. But I do think it is something we need to consider once we are there and have that in mind. I wouldn't want a vegan on our council. Jared, you're welcome to apply.
It may be the case, though, of the concept of prefiguring the society that you're trying to build. And so it may not be something that we're trying to recruit people with, but it may be something that active communists and socialists and anarchists want to cultivate within ourselves, like sort of start living that so that we can show the benefits of that to people in the future and say why it's good and why we're already doing that.
Yeah, I guess so. I think, again, it's just really hard to track that impact as it stands today, you know? Like, that seems like a tall order. I mean...
Right now, it's just like, it's just your soul. It's just you. That's the only person it's affecting. It's
Which
not
is good.
Really, yeah.
I'm also thinking about accessibility to, like, you know, we were vegan for a few months a few years ago, and it takes so fucking long to prepare, like, good, tasty, healthy vegan meals. And I know there are some quick ones, but, like, overall, I found it to be quite challenging. You had to be, like, just way more creative and way more willing to, like, spend time finding certain ingredients, especially depending on where you live. I know in my neighborhood, I would not be able to find everything I needed. Like, I would have to drive extra, which I already do because I'm very picky. But I think that's something we could work on, though, in our future society. Being like, what if in, you know, the communal kitchens where everyone can come get a meal for free, like, that's all vegan. And, like, if you want to cook meat, you can, but, like, you have to take the extra steps to go get that. But, like, default food is vegan, or, like, you know, you have professional cooks who are preparing it, and that obviously lessens the labor of it. Like, it becomes something that's really easy and accessible to eat.
I dig that. All right. That was that whole chapter that Kropotkin spent on, like, the kitchens and the...
I love that chapter.
He really got into it.
I just picture, like, Captain Sisko from Deep Space Nine just, like, cooking up in the communal kitchen, like, sit down.
I got gumbo today.
Hell yeah. Next is a little shorty from Gabe, and they just sent us a hilarious Venn diagram that I wanted to post. I'll message them and make sure that it's okay to post. For now, I'll just describe it for the listeners. This is based on some talk we had in episode 54 about the terms... there's a lot of thunder in the background, listeners. I'm going to try to edit it out, but we'll see. If it's extra spooky, it's our Halloween episode, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, about the terms MLM and all the different meanings. So you got pyramid schemes, you got the gay meaning, men loving men, if you're familiar with fan fiction tagging, and then communism, Marxist, Leninist, Maoist. Well,
there you go.
All right, so between pyramid scheme and gay, we have a triangle, which is a classic gay symbol. Between gays and communism, we have against heteronormativity, totally.
All right.
But what's the connector between the last two?
Between communism and pyramid scheme?
Difficult to do successfully?
It's a pretty good one, yeah. Maybe, you know, hasn't quite been pulled off 100%.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
A bad faith take would be like...
Impossible.
It's a scam.
Yeah. I put rely on the masses.
Oh, okay. One's exploiting
in good
them.
and bad ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is great. I also had another one for gay and communism. Fashionable.
Yeah. Communism tends to have some fun fashion choices. That's great.
Do you have any other ones?
No, I don't think so.
I had one. I don't know if it's acceptable, so we can cut it.
Okay. Sure.
But for gay and pyramid scheme, like, both have tops and bottoms.
That's fantastic. We're keeping that in. Absolutely.
Okay. All right.
That's good. That's very good.
And that's all I got.
Okay.
MLM, of course, is the perfect medium of this. Like,
yes.
There's no other alternative if you go in the center of that Venn diagram.
Wonderful. So thank you so much, Gabe. That was a fun game to fill in that blank.
Yeah.
Next, we have a question from Tim asking us about our thoughts on unionization in the tech industry. It seems like it's taken off recently with news about Google and Amazon employees forming a union, but overall seems to still be in its infancy. I work in tech, so I have some skin in the game, but find a lot of my colleagues not particularly paying any attention to developments regarding unions or care more about tech than their rights as workers. He references an article which talks about the history of making software and also unions as it relates to that. And he basically is like, hey, well, where is this going? What can I expect from this? It looks like it's in the early stages. Do you think there's anything particularly unique in the tech sector when it comes to unionization? And, also, how do you organize when your company is like working remote?
All right. Yeah, and he mentions probably not something to bring up on the next company Skype call.
That's a good instinct.
Idea.
Yeah, defo.
All right. So the article linked here called Agile and the Long Crisis of Software is an interesting read in terms of the origins of Agile.
Ugh, don't say that word to me outside of work hours.
So you've had experience with this.
Oh, yeah.
One of the many people scarred by this system.
It's the worst. It reduces everyone down to fucking leaderboards and points and bullshit.
Yeah. The article kind of makes it clear that it's like a new iteration of the age-old quest to rein in programmers to be more like manageable, disciplined little cogs for the bosses and the business people.
Yeah, absolutely.
It rationalizes and commodifies knowledge workers who kind of see things as more like abstract, like, oh, I get these things done in, however much time it takes me, and it just kind of flows, to make them like justify their work every day, basically a form of like do-it-yourself surveillance.
Absolutely. I come from kind of the other side of this. If there are any developers listening, I'm a designer. Please don't hate me. We're on the same side, okay? But what ends up happening a lot of times is like, so if you're not familiar with the Agile system, it basically makes you assign points to say like how long you think something's going to take. And like there's different point values, like generally higher is like, that's more days it'll take me. But what ends up happening is sometimes you discover in the process like, okay, this is harder than I thought it was going to be. And so you have to like end up making cuts to make something like shittier than you want to put out because you have to complete it. And so like you end up with, there's just no good decisions in it. There's no room for flexibility. There's no room for creativity. None of that. Because
you have to make the sprint, right?
Yes.
The end goal deadline, sort of to speak. You have these like daily, I don't know, at the workplace that I was at, they called it huddles, but you can call it whatever, your like daily little meeting.
Scrum is a common one.
Yeah. And this is where you tell them the metrics or whatever the hell you did yesterday, basically. Sometimes very granular, like this is exactly what I did. I mean, it's the knowledge worker version of Taylorism, of measuring every little body movement of the worker to make sure they're as efficient as possible.
That is a great comparison. I've never thought about it like that, but it totally is.
The article's interesting because, so it describes that, which I thought was a good little background thing. But the author kind of ends it by saying, Agile has the potential to foster solidarity among workers. If teams truly self-organize, share concerns, and speak openly, perhaps Agile could actually lend itself to worker organization. Maybe management through Agile is producing its own gravediggers.
Are they saying because we all hate Agile so much we'll revolt, or we're using Agile for a revolution?
See, I thought the latter. I guess the former actually makes some sense.
Because I know some folks who hate it just as much as I do.
Yeah, no, I don't know. If it's like, oh, we just start like talking and organizing and stuff. I don't think
way.
No one's honest at the Agile meetings. You're just trying to like check a box. You're talking. Even if the boss is not there, you're talking to the boss because that gets passed up.
Mm-hmm.
Its focus on accountability is like, to me, always bred resentment. It's like, I got to go and meet with these people. I don't like hate them on their own, really, but like I got to go and it's like, oh, I got to go like and be judged by them on what I did or didn't do. I should make a show of how productive I am when I know that I blew off half my day yesterday, but I got to pretend like I didn't.
Yeah, we all do. We all pad our deadlines. We all, overstate our resumes. Like that's just what you have to do. And the thing about like Agile, one of the things that drives me crazy is like it's work that begets more work. Like literally whole positions are created just to manage like all these points and like all
and
this
they have
organization.
Consultants and all this shit.
Oh yeah. There's training for it. There's all this shit. And I'm just like, how much time are we wasting talking about the work instead of like fucking doing the work?
Yeah.
And like then I'm also like, how much time am I wasting like doing work that doesn't matter instead of like meaningful work?
True. The crazy thing is that the article kind of talks about the history of it and how Agile kind of came from this previous workflow
Waterfall?
management. Yeah, Waterfall.
Yeah.
That's its like origin story or something. Apparently that got so bogged down that people were like, oh, we're going to do Agile. It's going to be nimble and better.
So much better.
But it basically just bogged down in the
It's
same
the
way.
same thing.
Yeah. So, but let's talk unionizing, because even if it doesn't spring out of Agile, it can still happen in technology and in the tech sector, even like Tim mentioned, in, hybrid kind of workplaces and stuff and remote. One of the questions was about, are there differences in the tech sector? I don't think there's an inherent difference, but I do think that remote situation will change some of the tactics.
Definitely.
Luckily, unions are cool, as we're wont to say on this program. And they like to help people start their own unions, solidarity, all that. So there are resources out there to look at. So where little me, never started a union, I can still give you advice. So there's even a campaign to organize digital employees in the tech and gaming sectors by a union called Communications Workers of America.
Interesting.
Yeah, there's a guide. I'll link it in the notes here that the CWA put together to help you get started. But that's what I'm going to basically use as my template here on advice. So the first step in union organizing is talking to your coworkers about your workplace concerns. What you want to do is make a list with them of your top 5 issues. We want more pay, better benefits. What are the conditions like here that we don't like, or how's the boss treating us unfairly, or whatever. A bitch session, which you can easily do, right? I mean, we've all done this.
We all have the chat with that one guy who's on our side.
Yeah. So you start talking to your coworkers. Now, your eventual goal is going to be to recruit around 10% of your workforce.
Okay.
Eventually. You don't have to be there yet.
That's a lot for some companies.
Yeah. But you're starting out kind of with a nucleus of people to kind of determine if there's a base of support for forming a union at all. Or if you're working in, the Donald Trump 2024 sign factory, maybe there's not. Maybe that's not going to work.
My Pillow.
Yeah. Mike Lindell's factory. Maybe not.
Oh, gosh.
So one thing that Tim mentioned was not doing it on the Skype call. Yes.
Yeah, defo. Take that offline.
Don't do that. Any work monitored technology cannot be used at this stage. It's really easy if the bosses catch wind of unionization efforts pre-actual unionization efforts. They found this out at Starbucks and stuff recently. That basically, if they catch wind of it too soon, they can kind of soft retaliate against you. Soft on their end, meaning that they haven't actually legally broken any laws because
There's no union yet.
Started a union or a drive for it. But hard on your end because you're getting fucked out of a job. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Special warning to tech workers. I know a lot of us will end up using work laptops for personal reasons. If you're working app design, I know a lot of people who test their apps on their own phone. That can come with security profiles. So you want to take that off of your phone. That kind of stuff. Double check your tech.
Yeah, for sure. But, even if you're remote, you can chat in other ways. You can text, you can email, you can do a Discord, whatever that's not on company network, company technology, that sort of thing. Like you said, with your phone, maybe it's not on the network, you're using your own data, but they can still monitor in some way.
I mean, I don't know the extent of it. Maybe I'm totally wrong about the privacy, but not for me. Thanks.
Yeah. It's, I think, harder to do still because there's less of a reason to socialize in that remote setting. Mm-hmm. Why are you doing this? But
it's awkward. You have to be can I have your phone number? Yeah, that always sucks to have to ask a work coworker, hey.
Yeah. But maybe the trick here is to try to read their vibes in the normal company meetings and Slack combos and whatever else you're doing. Try to, gauge who's kind of not a narc, who's not an asshole. Who's not a lapdog, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then approach with the union ideas on those one-on-ones like text or whatever outside, and then form a group chat with all your discovered comrades. So that's the initial thing, talking to people. Then you go to building an organizing committee. So this is where you're trying to get to 10% of your employees. They should be representative of your workplace overall. You want experienced people, you want newer people, you want a mix of everybody, in particular people who garner respect. And this is not a seniority thing necessarily, but everyone in you kind of gravitate towards
leaders,
people. Yeah, who know what the fuck they're doing, that sort of thing. And then this stage is where you can contact a union like the CWA or whoever to get advice and get support on the next step, which is going to be building majority support. So once you have that organizing committee together, this is where you start talking with your fellow workers and trying to convince them to support unionization. So outside of the people who you've cautiously felt out, now you're going to start saying, hey, let's have a union to people. The guide that I'm referencing recommends getting workers to sign a public petition, supporting the union, and stating your key issues and your goals, but not actually revealing who's on that list until you've got a majority. So they can't single them out and go talk to them and everything.
Okay, gotcha.
They also say to restrict it to breaks in non-working locations or off of company property. So to us, this is still avoiding company monitored communication. They also mention, and this is just kind of true across the board, this is where you can start to expect, if they haven't picked up on you already, now they're going to know.
Oh, yeah.
And the company's going to jump in, and all of a sudden they are both going to be your family. They're going to beg you, please give us another chance to fix these problems without some outside union.
Come on, baby. I can be better.
Coming in. Yeah, they're going to do this and also threaten you. And if you don't,
It is textbook abuse.
Yeah. So that's when they're going to start jumping in, and with all the tactics, all the mandatory meetings. But yeah, from there, basically, you're looking at gathering majority support, holding a union election that's overseen by the National Labor Relations Board, and doing that. The union at this point, whatever union you're working with, and you definitely should do that, they should be helping you, guiding you, getting you materials, having their union organizer work with you. But again, remember, you're the one in the driver's seat. If you get to this point, all throughout it, you are the one doing it, you and your workers. So when they come out there, the bosses and everything, and they tell you, oh, we don't want these other people. It's motherfuckers, me.
That is me.
These guys.
I am people.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, that sounds really fucking hard.
It does.
I mean, I think tech is an interesting field. He was asking, how is that unique? To me, I think tech is really interesting because I think there's a bit of a dichotomy there between maybe what the pop culture thinks of as tech in terms of it's just go run and, break things and very disruptor, very startup, that kind of stuff, which absolutely abuses the fuck out of its workers, for sure. And then you have just larger companies that definitely can still abuse their workers. I'm not saying they don't, but because they have larger budgets, or these are the people that are mollified by capitalism. These are the people that are in the cushy jobs that aren't too hard and make a lot of money. So I think that's going to be the trick, is figuring out, what kind of situation you're in and how to agree on the grievances that are going to arise from different types of companies. I'm almost more interested in a cross-company union, I think, for tech, for that reason, just because I think it'd be really hard to organize some of the larger, those cushier positions.
Okay, so you're saying more of an industrial union that doesn't just cover that one workplace, but is all tech, all coders, all programmers.
I think maybe, yeah, because I think the same applies for designers and that whole field is, that runs the gamut from severely abused freelancers and people in these really small startup places to people who are doing okay, comfortable. And I still care about those people, don't get me wrong, and I want to be involved in helping them. But I can't personally say here's my list of grievances because I'm being treated like shit. 'Cause I'm not, but I want to help people who are.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
Just a thought.
Yeah. And I mean, from the other end of that would be the difficulty in gauging where your coworkers are at, because you're oh, they seem pretty cool, but you don't really know how much they're bringing down, how comfortable they are. And then you approach them and no, everything's great. I love it.
It's cool.
Shit. Okay. Anyway, catch you later.
All right. Bye. All right. That was Unionizing 101. easy. Not easy at all.
Again, check out the links. I've seen multiple guides of this type, so there's different ones to fit different situations, I'm sure.
Cool. All right, next we have a question from Jimmy, and they ask, how would you recommend talking to people who came or whose family came over from socialist projects or countries? I mentioned in past emails that I am Vietnamese American, and the diaspora is a fucking mess. Even liberals don't really know the history of Vietnam, so it's an upward battle to challenge them to question their lived experiences. I know leftist Cubans who talk about dealing with right-wing Cubans regarding the revolution, Chinese friends who also combat propaganda around the revolution and around Mao, and tons of Eastern Europeans who engage with all of their past. Obviously, all these histories vary greatly, but I know it's a struggle for me sometimes, so I can't imagine how it is to explain to someone when you can't be like, well, I'm this ethnicity, so...
Yeah. What do you think here?
I agree. This is a super thorny issue. I think we live in an era where, if you've been on Twitter, personal experience is the only fucking thing that matters, apparently.
As a blank.
Yeah, exactly. As a whatever. Or like, have you seen the garden tweet?
No.
Oh my! You missed out on the coffee with my husband tweet?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm regular.
Okay, I'm so happy for you, honestly. Good for you. Way to be offline. This woman made a tweet saying, I'm so happy that I get to have coffee with my husband every morning out in the garden, and people attacked her. And we're like, well, some of us can't afford to do that, or some of us hate our husbands, and like all this shit. Like, personally, I can't do this, so this sucks, or like, this is ableist, or this is whatever. And it's like, whoa, what are we doing? So it becomes impossible to have conversations because everyone is so, frankly, self-centered and centering their narrative. And it's the thing of like, you can't invalidate my story here. So yeah, I've definitely met people who fall into this category, especially as the social media person for the show. Woo boy, get a lot of angry folks in my DMs.
Yeah, I don't tune in till after they've cleaned that shit up. So
yeah, I delete shit. So
again, I'm regular.
Deal with it.
So
good for you. You don't have worm brain. So yeah, it's really hard, and I would say it's pretty pointless to argue against that kind of personal experience. You're always going to lose. I instead try to validate and express empathy and be like, yeah, that sucks. And, I return to our dear, dear maxim, two things can be true at once, because, your family could have had a very horrible, awful, no good time there, but other people didn't. and that's what we have to fight. And that is one of the core things we have to fight against on this show is the idea of like painting these communist and socialist projects with such a broad brush of like, it was the worst. Everyone was starving. It was evil, blah, blah, blah. And like,
10 billion people died.
Exactly. And like, our job is to try to look at that further and be like, who's saying this? Why are they saying this? Do we have any more accurate numbers? And do our best to try to parse through that data. But it's really hard when you're up against someone's personal experience.
Yeah, I would agree for sure. Like, and with that, I think we try to do a good job of admitting the excesses of revolutions where they happen.
Yeah, we got the strike system.
Admitting the shortcomings of actual socialist states, past and present, what they're doing that we like and dislike. I think that helps us improve future projects. It's a good, and also tactically, it's a good way to look reasonable to whomever you're talking to.
Absolutely. Like, people value concession a lot because it's so rare in our terminally online society.
Well, it's like everyone's encountering bad improv people, like online, they type this thing out and then someone else replies with, no, that's wrong. Uh-huh. Instead of a yes and technique. They value that a lot.
Always be improving.
Yeah. Always be improving. That's our thing is, yeah, okay, all right. Sure. I think to the extent that you can, because, quite frankly, you're going to deal with, intended or not, anti-communist propaganda a lot of times rather than true firsthand experience. Oh, we heard, or there were stories of. This is not something that someone actually went through. It may be like second or third hand, but it may not be. We hear all these sorts of things. Everybody's got, even within one's own family, you have tall tales and legends and shit that you're like, I've heard this. This story no longer checks out.
It's just not add up.
Thing.
Yeah. I mean, like, even our mom, I mean, she's complained about the socialized healthcare in Mexico. And, like, I think it's easy to complain about something you're no longer in because you're bought into seeing your current situation as better. Or at least you hope it is. So, like, with that kind of stuff, you're like, you know, when people are like, oh, the long wait lines in Canada, they're terrible, that kind of thing. You can be like, you also have long wait lines here. Like, that has not gotten better here.
Well, yeah, it depends. Yeah, in our case, in that specific case, it depends on how much money you have. Whether you're lucky enough to have employer health insurance or whatever, a good enough plan even within that. There's all sorts of mitigating factors. And you also have to look at the converse of that, which is, oh, you have long wait lines.
For something free? Sure.
Right. The alternative was, before this, we didn't have healthcare.
Yeah.
We had a doctor that we would, you know, either travel miles to get to or would come like once a year. This is the alternative. So this was a major step up. But that's a very specific example. But there's lots of different iterations of cutting through that and seeing what are the actual facts. Why were people... We don't exactly, you know, we're not super fans of the guy, but still, why were there, you know, these mile-long lines or whatever, super long, I don't know mile, but like long lines of people coming to pay their last respects to Stalin when he died.
Yeah.
Maybe some people were making a show of it, but I mean, some people also like were saved from the Nazis because of this guy.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, these revolutions, they're made up of like tons of people. You know, like, inherently, these are socialist revolutions. They are provided for by the masses. So that means, like, a fuck ton of people said, yeah, I'm on board.
So, yeah, I mean, you're gonna have different backgrounds. It's gonna make things awkward. I think, like you said, to keep in mind, your own lived experience doesn't speak for all people from that country.
Yeah.
Here we are in the capitalist hellhole, the United States. Rife with capitalism supporters, let alone capitalists, and we're communists saying how bad it sucks, you know, and obviously you couldn't just say, oh, everyone in America agrees with them.
Yeah,
like,
I'd be very mad.
You know, so the opposite happens, right? So even in these ongoing socialist projects, historical ones, I mean, you know, there's still tons of people who have lived through the collapse of the Soviet Union or socialist Eastern European state. There's all these examples of people who, like we said, you know, one of the common examples you get is, you know, former East Germany people saying, oh, how bad it was or whatever. But I watched that whole documentary series of people who were like, man, I miss that shit.
Yeah. For everyone saying it's bad, or the same people admitting some of it was good. But for everyone that says it's bad, there's also people saying, like, that was fucking awesome.
Yeah, so I guess when we're tallying it up, they may, you know, I think it's good to listen for points that you can be like, I do want to look more into that. Like, were they actually bad at this, you know? Definitely your first instinct shouldn't be like, oh, fuck, it turns out communism's bad. Like, obviously don't
win.
do that. But
you got me.
You know, but listen, I think it's a good way to, at the very least, sharpen your defense of different things. You know, go in and read about it and see where they actually, you know, was this particular project or this current state, is it fucking up in this department? Because then you'll be like, okay, this is something I can admit. Or you'll be like, actually, no, they're not. You know, they're actually good at this. Like, here's why. You know, and you can add that to your arsenal. That's one of the reasons I like being proven wrong about things, being corrected, is that either I learn something and I'm like, whoa, okay, cool, that's a better idea than I had, or I can be like, well, that's stupid, and here's why.
No, definitely,
it's a win-win.
Yeah, it's good to have those dialogues, and it's always so difficult to be, again, like, respectful, because it can be so personal. People turn this into like, you're decrying my family, that kind of thing. So, you know, tread with caution. Jimmy also sent us a fun question, which of course we're going to do. Which socialist leader, Marxist, anarchist, or otherwise, would you have crushed on if they went to your high school? There's, like, really only one or two right answers for this. For me, it's Shay. I mean, wow, body be the body. Or Emma Goldman, depending on my mood and my...
All right. Depending on your...
the gender of the week.
Yeah. I'm surprised you didn't go for young Stalin. That's a popular pick.
He is a hottie. Totally. But, I mean...
Too much of a bad boy vibe?
Yeah. I don't know if I can go there.
But Che had a motorcycle, so also a bad boy.
Yeah, definitely a bad boy, but he's hilarious. He seems funny. Good sense of humor. Very hot. Hates capitalism. That's all I need in a man.
Check.
Emma Goldman, very hot. Likes to dance. I love to dance, so we could dance together.
There you go.
I think we'd be a good match too.
All right. My pick was Ito Noe.
Oh, she's cute.
Yeah, and she's like artsy literature nerd type.
Yeah.
You know?
She could write you poems.
Especially you're saying when you went to high school, like everyone's pretentious as fuck in high school, so you're like, oh, that's deep. That's a deep poem. Like, you know.
Yeah, that's fair.
I'm sure some of you guys were well adjusted and like normal in high school, but I feel like
Listen,
I
we
was
all
at
wrote
least
some shit in high school.
yeah. So that would Ito Noe is where I'm going there.
Good choice. Next up, from Kate, asking us to share some resources for news and analysis that is not Western/capitalist centered. I want to read more about world events without the typical US/capitalist propaganda. Me too. Any tips here? All
right. Tip number 1 is not what you're asking for, but this is like the actual, the real solution to this. It's quite good. Is
get good at translating the news.
Right. Yeah. To understand the press as kind of like almost a mouthpiece for the establishment. So I'm talking like the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, the papers of record or whatever. These guys are like getting press releases and stuff from the State Department, from the government. They're representing the establishment view. And then you can kind of translate a lot of the news yourself.
Oh, yeah.
With good reporting, because these guys all think they're the next Woodward and Bernstein. So they're all, trying to do a dig and inside scoop, and they get some good information this way. They're also framing it through this lens that's like basically, like you say, pro-US, pro-capitalist. So you can get both good information and then like de-filter it from what they've done to get the actual story. That's the best technique.
Yeah. I mean, for that, I would definitely, look into Noam Chomsky again. Do a little brush up on that. But yeah, it's kind of just a skill of like, it really does feel like you're translating a language.
Yeah. And one important kind of stepping stone, I think, is what you're asking for here of like getting alternative sources. Because then you can read the regular stories and then the cool stories and be like, oh, okay, well, so that's what they were saying. It kind of guides you with it. So one good source, I think, for this is Jacobin. They're self-admittedly social democratic. They're a little soft, but it's a good internationalist, socialist perspective. They're never giving you some sort of American exceptionalism bullshit.
Yep.
Or anything like that. So I think they're good. If you're into Reddit, which I just bragged about being regular. If you want to be regular, don't do Reddit.
Go there.
But if you want to dabble, and you can have an extremely curated experience there, so you don't have to wade into the cesspools that are some of these subreddits. But when I'm looking for leftist perspectives on various topics, there's a few I hit up. And they both have this format. So there's communism and Communism 101, which is like communism is just like, it's kind of a Marxist-Leninist / MLM sort of orientation. There's one like general content, and then the 101 is like a Q&A sort of learning about sort of thing. So people post questions like, what does Marx mean by whatever? That sort of thing. And then there's the same thing for socialism, which is like bigger tent. It's not as like Marxist-Leninist. Both of these are, I think, good places to just use that search function, see what's going on, like, when there's a coup going down somewhere or people are talking about invading something, what's going on with this sort of thing.
Okay, good.
And then podcasts. And here I'm going to say plugging our comrades here rather than our competition.
Yes, no competition in the socialist state.
Yes, there are plenty of good podcasts out there besides ours to help you kind of see through things. If you're wanting like a focus on this idea of the media and how to better read it and how to kind of see patterns in what they're all doing. One good podcast for that is Citations Needed. These guys, they're not like, I don't think they're like actual communists or anything, but they have a good generally left perspective and critical of the media as essentially a U.S. propaganda outlet.
I mean, yeah, true.
So they do their homework, they break it down. They have like a topic. So they're like the media's unfair portrayal of like homelessness and you know, it's bias there and everything. And they'll go through and break it all down and show what they're really trying to do, basically.
Okay.
Then for like just more current events, more analysis, things like that from a leftist perspective. One of the ones I like is Rev Left Radio. I mentioned it before.
Yeah, they're a great source.
Yeah, they've got good history, good theory, good current events too. Sometimes he does like real short ones where he just like does a little quick rant or something about like something that's happening in the news, like just gets it off his chest sort of thing. So that's a good one. Comrade Brett O'Shea out there. Guerrilla History, he's on that one too, and there's other guys as well, these professors, I want to say. Guerrilla History is good, like anti-imperialist leftist analysis. Lots of history, but also some current events, especially when shit starts popping off. They're like, whoa, what's the background on this? And so you can really start to better understand when something like Ukraine happens. Why is that happening?
Gotcha, yeah.
Another one I'll plug that does a lot of current events that's, to me, easy to understand, although I get the criticism that it's sometimes simplistic, is Economic Update with Richard Wolff.
Yeah, that guy.
I think it's real clear-cut, especially if you're newer to the project and everything. I mean, because he'll like mix in marks in a way that's easy to understand versus like just slogging through capital. But he likes to do current events and things in too, to kind of like show where this is happening.
That's cool.
In our world, yeah. And the last one is a little more localized in Alabama, but it's still kind of interesting. The Valley Labor Report.
Yeah, I think I've heard of them.
Yeah, so they're like a left-wing radio show in Alabama that focuses on labor issues. So they're obviously always doing current events and stuff and talking about like unionization efforts and strikes and strike funds and different things to kind of support the labor movement there.
Very cool.
All right. Yeah. Again, the number one tip is get good at decoding, demystifying, pulling back that veil. Get you one of those pairs of glasses from They Live and you can see what they really mean.
Exactly. We have now reached the praxis section. As you all may recall, we made a little pledge to do a little more out there. Try to get more involved with things. Do some mutual aid. Do some actual work.
Do something.
Do something. More than sitting on our asses yapping in a mic. But we also received a couple emails from folks telling us what they did. So we want to talk about that. Let's start with this awesome email from Cassie. And she tells us about some of her activities. My practice for this month is donating to my county's culture committee, who are having a day of remembrance for the Sand Creek Massacre, where natives are coming to speak. I'm also big into mutual aid, so I sent my friend some money for an unexpected bill, and my partner paid for his friend's meds because they had a hard time paying for them this month. In general, I've started to live my values more over the last year. I've been listening to you guys. Thanks.
Oh.
I always give people the option to not pay me for stuff. I don't need the money because I want to do things for free if possible. It makes them uncomfortable, but also introduces a new way of exchange and brings joy to my work. It feels like I'm giving a gift. I recently wrote a book and did a pay-what-you-want model. I ended up getting $10 to $60 for every book sold and gave some away as well. It was really cool and balanced out in the end. My partner loves to cook, so he'll make a big one-pot meal for a local food kitchen. They bring us ingredients in a pot and then pick up the finished food. We also have skill parties, where all our friends come over and we drink and learn how to make bread or pasta or wine or candles. Gives me a sense of power to learn things that are so basic with those I love. It makes me feel more prepared for whatever bullshit is coming for us in the future. It's cool to eat, drink, use everyone's stuff afterwards too. If possible, we try to keep $20 bills in the car for homeless folks, and if we don't have any, we will run to an ATM if there's one around. Our neighbors sell tamales and offer to do lawn stuff for us, so we keep cash on us for them as well. Lastly, I dropped out of having, quote, normal jobs. I've been gardening for people in my neighborhood, teaching them about edible weeds in their lawn, and giving them suggestions on lawn replacement. Walking their dogs, painting garages, doing odd jobs. Not only am I more free from the system, but I'm getting to know my community. I'm going to make all my clients apple butter for the end of the season as a thank you. We just try to be as generous and helpful as possible because that feels like all we can really do for one another in this hellscape. Cassie, you are amazing.
That is dope. You're living the dream. You're starting the commune before it's there.
Totally. Like, that's such a great example of, like, really living in and for your neighborhood. I love it. And
I like the idea of preparing ahead of time for whatever the storm brings.
Totally. Oh, man. Honestly, this email was a big inspiration to me. Like, there were so many small things from this. I'm like, oh, I could do that. I could start keeping money in my car. My husband is a fantastic cook. I could call up a food kitchen and be like, hey, do you have a thing like this where I can just make a meal for you and drop stuff off? Like, totally.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of stuff here that I think our listeners could use to get ideas.
That would be cool. I would kind of want to do that.
I love the yard stuff, too. I one day want to zero-scape my yard. I think that'll be cool.
No, this is good. A lot of little ways, a lot of little things to do.
Yeah, but I think they really add up. I think it's super impressive.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, more on the question end of things from Renee. How can people like me, high school students, who have conservative, Republican parents and family members actively join or do something Marxist-Leninist in my community? I'm also in conservative states, and all my friends are conservative. So I included this in this section because I think Cassie gave us some great recommendations to start with, but I also wanted to address like some other options. And I will start by talking a little bit about what I did this month. So I went and volunteered at the Oak Cliff Veggie Project, which is a community garden, and it is a nonprofit that basically works to, one, build a garden and, do all the work that entails, and also distribute food to people who need it. They just have a sign that's like, free food. You can just pull up and get food, like, no questions asked. And they also make deliveries. So it was a really cool day. I think they have volunteer days like the second Saturday of every month. I found out through Instagram and I was like, that sounds great. Let's do it. So I spent some time like helping in the garden, like clearing out the shed and kind of moving stuff around for them. And then I switched over to like food bag prep, building these veggie bags for people. And then I helped with deliveries. And that was for renal patients, so they have like specific dietary needs, and so taking their produce to them. Yeah, it was really good. I met some cool people and I'd love to go again. Yeah, I recommend a project like that. Just a few hours on a Saturday.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that's not even, like you say, all your friends are conservative Republican parents. It's not really objectionable to just be like, oh, I'm helping like feed people, Yeah,
and the reason I bring that up is this actually is like sponsored by a church, which like listeners, you know how I feel about religion. You might be surprised. But like the end work they're doing, like to me, it didn't matter. Like, yeah, you threw a Bible verse on your business card and put it in the bag, but like, who cares? Like, you gave people food. I think, if you want to look into like some parent-approved mutual aid, I think that maybe a program like that might be a good fit.
That makes sense.
But yeah, back to the question. I think overall it's going to be hard to answer this without knowing exactly how much freedom you have. Like if you have your own car and transportation, if you have the ability to consume your own media without like supervision, extracurriculars, stuff like that. But, we're going to try. Use what you can. I would say the number one thing you can do is to keep learning. Get a library card and read all those books that get people in trouble. I think that's huge.
Yeah, and you can always do the reverse of the hiding the comic book in the textbook thing. So if you've got the Communist Manifesto or the Conquest of Bread, but it's like stuffed in a cosmopolitan mag, or just something that they expect you
benign.
To be. Yeah,
the Bible.
Teen Vogue.
Or you could just read the parts of the Bible that are socialist.
Yeah, just break out the Digger's reading guide to the Bible, and you'll be good. There's some good stuff called liberation theology.
Oh yeah.
Don't call it that, but dig into it yourself. Figure out like what the cool points are. We'll probably do an episode on that in the future.
Yeah, definitely.
And then you can kind of like, wow, we don't really know if they're religious. It just says conservative.
Yeah,
Republican.
That's true. We're making some assumptions here.
So sorry if they're not religious. That doesn't apply then. But anyway, hide your communist literature in a Glenn Beck book or something.
Oh,
That's
God.
my advice.
Oh, God. But yeah, I think looking into a neutral, quote unquote, neutral cause like food, food pantries or something that's affiliated with a church might appease to more conservative family members. Like, how are you going to say, like, don't feed people? I'm sure people do. I'm sure conservatives have arguments against that. Don't get me wrong.
Sure.
But that's, I think, maybe a good start. But yeah, I mean, overall, having grown up in a conservative environment, I'd say it is kind of a balance of making sure you are not ostracized by your friends and family and like you feel like you have nobody, and trying to live your values. Like, I don't like it sounds dark, but like sometimes you're just gonna have to focus on surviving and getting through it until you have more independence. Do what you can and find those places where you can be yourself for sure, and maybe online is the place for you to do that. But yeah, I think it's going to be kind of a balancing act between keeping yourself safe and keeping yourself happy.
Yeah, that's a good point. There is just a ton more you can do once you're out from under that thumb.
Yeah, for sure. If that is a concern, I guess, if finances are a concern, maybe getting a part-time job so you don't have to rely on them financially after you turn 18. Maybe that's something you're interested in. Yeah, it's very tough whenever you're in that situation.
And that's safer than like the Stalin alternative of robbing banks.
But not as hot.
True. Yeah, it's a trade-off always.
Next, we have an email from Ian, our friend from DSA.
Heck yeah.
So he says that he is now in law school. I was waiting to write in because I was trying to arrange to do work for a union to fulfill the law school's pro bono requirements. I found it harder than expected to arrange that, so I'm still waiting, but decided to write in anyway with the two things that I have done. First, the school's Federalist Society invited Scott Stewart to speak on campus. He's the lawyer who argued Dobbs versus Jackson, women's health, in front of the Supreme Court, and is responsible for overturning Roe v. Wade. So like a real asshole.
Ooh, yeah, Scott Stewart sucks.
Fuck that guy. So, along with my comrades in the National Lawyers Guild and in cooperation with the ACS, which is the liberal org on campus, and Outlaw, the LGBTQ org on campus, I helped to organize a protest of the event, which I think was fairly successful.
Nice.
Yeah, impressive. Second, I'm also working on radicalizing a liberal classmate. I've gotten him to recognize that revolution might be necessary. Hey, that's huge.
Damn.
And have him reading a leftist book, so it's going well.
Excellent.
Yeah, way to convert.
Those liberals, they love a good argument, man. So
oh, yeah.
Spin them some good logic.
They will feel accomplished for months.
Logic is on your side with that, and also emotion. So they're like ripe for the pickings if you can argue well.
That's true. Very true.
Say a lot of, well, Ian, you obviously know this if you're converting people, but to the rest of the listeners, say a lot of, like you said. That's the most persuasive phrase in the English language, to be honest.
I've heard you basically get our mother to admit that she's socialist with that phrase, so you've done well.
I lean on it. It's my crutch, for sure.
It's a good one.
I love the success that Ian had in both of those, putting together that protest, radicalizing folks.
Hell yeah. Keep it up.
Good job, Ian. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, you have me.
All right,
so my praxis mission failed, basically, or rather has been postponed.
Okay.
So, I don't know, this experience made me think a little bit more about my role as what Marx would call a bourgeois intellectual. And so I don't know, I feel like I'm a little bit more okay with that, a little less...
Guilty?
Yeah, a little less guilty, a little less agonizing about it. Having seen so many of the... I probably didn't see all of the options, but so many of the options that what if I do this, what if that? And I shrunk away from all of them, basically. I'm just like, no, I don't want to. It's scary. I have to talk and, all this. I have resolved to do something. Yeah, it's going to be smaller in scope. I'm going to do a little volunteer with the church that I attend. They're going to be putting together these little bags of supplies and shit for homeless people.
Yeah.
So, I saw that on there and I'm like, okay, I'm going to do that. But it's not till late November. But I feel like it's going to be, it's way smaller in scope. But to me, that's more reasonable than what I initially set out to look for of what if I joined a real ass organization and I started doing stuff. And I feel like I set the bar way high for what I actually am comfortable doing.
No, I totally get that. And, like, I think I did that to myself, too. Like, originally that weekend, I was also going to go to a DSA meeting, and I was going to seriously take a look at, like, getting more involved in one of the committees there. And, like, I didn't do any of that shit. Like, I did one thing for, like, 3 hours one day. I don't know. Again, I'm very inspired by our listeners in the idea of, like, try different levels of things and see what sticks, you know?
Yeah. And that's what I'm thinking of doing here is hopefully doing something small and like that being okay, and maybe building off of it. But if it doesn't, you know, I mean, the revolution does need leaders, but it also needs followers. So I'll be a follower if it has to be.
You can be like the living library that we're like, hey, what did that guy do again that sucked? And you're like, well, it was this. We shouldn't do that. Like, all right, thanks.
Yeah, there you go. When the internet is gone.
When the internet's out, we have you.
I don't know. That was my experience in it. I do feel a little bit less like you said, guilty or anguished, you know, about like, oh, I should be, 30 something already, and I haven't, taken part in a revolution. All this ridiculous shit that we see, and it's like, yeah, that's kind of fine, I do want to be involved more, and I think that, probably going to DSA meetings is not like going to be bad for us if we start trying to make that a regular thing, and then ease our way into like trying to work with committees and stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't know. I think it'd probably be good for us, but I want to start small because I don't know. It really wasn't even putting anything off. I started this like the weekend that we first mentioned it, looking at it and stuff, but everything was just so nerve-wracking to me. So.
Just overwhelming.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know. So kind of a failure, sort of a realization, hopefully a growth in the future. I feel like this was a tarot card reading or something. A failure, a realization, a growth. Perfect.
Oh, no, I totally get it. And I don't know, this sounds very, not to toot my own horn here, but like the fact that these listeners like said that we inspired some of their action, like that's fucking rad.
That is, yeah.
Yeah, that's super
that is
cool.
Awesome.
And I will say again, as the person who manages our social media and our emails, like we get a lot of feedback from our listeners that are like, hey, like, thanks, like you made me a socialist. Like, that's great. We have converted a few people. We got them.
Awesome. Yeah.
So we did something. And yeah, listeners, please keep sending those. My ego needs it. It sustains me. And I'll also make it public. Put it on Apple. Put it on iTunes or whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think it's tricky, and I would love to find more ways to get involved. I particularly on a neighborhood level, like I should probably start going to my neighborhood meetings and like start feeling people out over there and like see what the deal is. And that's something I'd love to work towards. So yeah, we've got stuff we want to do.
Yeah. And thank you again to Ian, to Renee, to Cassie, to all the listeners who sent in questions.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, they were great.
And yeah, congrats or solidarity.
Absolutely.
To you guys who met the Praxis challenge. That's
Good
awesome.
job, y'all.
What are we doing next week?
Next week, I am taking us down a medieval path. We are going to learn about the Chompy Revolt.
The Chompy Revolt.
Yes.
Okay. Is it cool?
It's cool. I will go ahead and say up front, it is not explicitly socialist, but I think it is an interesting example of medieval economics.
Okay. That is not as far from Marx as you would expect.
Exactly.
Marx and Engels, they both did a lot of research into pre-capitalist societies and stuff and wrote about that a lot. So maybe there's some intersection.
I think there is. I think it's an interesting analysis of what that proto-capitalist structure looked like and how it affected people and all that kind of shit. So yeah, we'll learn about that. Excellent.
I'll see you then. Hopefully we'll get the Praxis ball rolling on my end before then.
Awesome.
Or not before then, but
soon. I believe in you.
We'll get it going.
It's going to happen.
Thank you.
I'll keep bugging you if you want.
All right. Yeah, kind of.
I can be kind of a taskmaster if you want me to be. How do you think I have 2 jobs in a podcast? I am my own taskmaster.
For real. Yeah.
All right, y'all. Talk to you next week.
See ya.
Bye. Hey there, comrades. Just jumping in to remind you of all of our social media. We are on Twitter at teachcommunism, Instagram at teachmecommunism. You can shoot us an email. That's teachmecommunism@gmail.com. Any of those places are good to send us an episode suggestion or a question, anything you think would be useful feedback for us, or just your admiration. If you want to admire us in a public manner, and you should, you can go to Apple Podcasts to give us a review. It is the best way to help people find the show. Love when people write and review us. Please do both. We are also on YouTube, if that's how you prefer to listen to podcasts, or if you know someone that's the only way they'll listen to podcasts, send them to our page. And we have a Patreon. For $5 a month, you get access to our notes for each week's episode, including the backlog of notes, which is a very handy resource for up-and-coming commies. And at the end of the year, all of the funds from Patreon will be given to local mutual aid in the DFW area. So, ain't going to line our pockets. Finally, we have merch. Check us out at TeePublic. You can find shirts and I believe also stickers and magnets and all kinds of fun stuff with catchphrases from the show or episode art, stuff like that. The link to that store is in the show notes, so check that out. Okay, that's all the internet. Join us next time for another episode of Teach Me Communism, where the class struggle is always in session. Bye, y'all.